All right, thanks so much for joining us, folks. We appreciate you. Welcome to the farm. Welcome to the 18th Annual Earthwork Harvest Gathering. So this is a wonderful, very powerful panel, and appreciate you coming to listen and take this in. This is a panel on colonialism and cultural appropriation. So I hope to do as little amount of speaking myself as possible, and hope to do as much listening and learning as possible. But the idea here is that we can increase our cultural awareness and our historical understanding, and that this will be a small session that will help you develop the ability to respond to our society's need for healing and its power dynamics. And so we have a really amazing panel here. I'm going to briefly introduce each person on the panel and then let them speak for themselves. So all the way down on my far left, your right, we have Rachel Marco Havens, who's a multi-platform solutionary artist and cultural worker from Woodstock, New York. Welcome back, Rachel.
Thank you. It's really good to be here.
At her first Earthwork Harvest Gathering, honored to have Julie Dye with the Michigan Coalition Against Racism in Sports and Media. Thank you, Julie. And so we have the full band, John Orpheus, who are going to be closing down this stage tonight, but we have John and Sarah and Chanel all joining us, fresh in from Toronto.
Yeah. Hey, hello.
Great. So I think we'll start with just you guys introducing yourselves, speaking a little bit more. I just lost myself in the monitors. Thank you. Speaking a little bit more about what your work is like and how you sort of approach this. Just left again. We're getting it dialed in, you know. There it is. That's great. Just perfect right there. Thank you. So talking about giving some perspective to the topic of colonialism and cultural appropriation, and the work that you're doing, the work that you have done, and the work that you're currently doing. And then I'll field another question. There will be some time at the end for you guys to ask questions too.
Okay, and I'll try to be quick, although I'm a woman of many words. Let's see, what do I do? What have I done? I was born and raised in Woodstock, New York, which is really a mecca of cultural spirit, of spiritual and cultural appropriation. It's a landing spot. And I grew up selling the new age to Woodstock. Everything from metaphysical books, crystals, astrology charts, futons, new age music, vitamins. And I didn't even realize what I was being raised with. It just was normal to me. So what a lot of people go to workshops to attain is what I was raised on. And yet, I kind of came up a jaded hippie. Like, on one hand, I find myself saying, really, you want to appropriate that entire geode from Paraguay and bring it to Australia so that people can meditate in it? And at the same time, that makes no sense to me. And at the same time, I'm going to check before I close on a house to see if Mercury is not retrograde. Like, it's all in this jumbled mess of who I am. And so I was raised in the center of celebrity culture. And as a family member of a celebrity, quote unquote, I was raised very turned off by people, the objectification of people. And I also saw a lot of objectification of different people's cultures growing up, and that really turned me off, although again, that's kind of who I was. So it's a really wild, mixed up jumble to try to unpack all of that. And I recently accepted an adoption into a tribe from the land that I was born and raised, and the only land I know. And it took me a couple of years to accept that adoption, and maybe we'll talk about that in a little bit. And so, but what I do now is I got off the cushion a few years ago, inspired by this actual gathering, and drove home in tears, not expecting the same sort of false community that had been fed to the masses and I just wept because we don't have this here. This is what I grew up, this is my life in the 70s, is harvest. And so I went home feeling really empty, and when I got there, there was a message in my inbox that said, your water is in play, and there's a massive bottling plant coming for your sacred lake. And I had to step up, I had to get off the cushion, stop meditating, and take action. And it's been a really wild 4 years. Thank you, Seth, and thank you, Harvest and Michigan family, for leading me to this table right now.
Thank you, Rachel.
Bonjour, Bodwedwadme, and now Nishkan Kirokwe, Indishnikas. My name is Julie Dye. I'm a Pokagon Band Potawatomi from southwestern Michigan, also Wapo Island First Nation from Canada. My organization is the Michigan Coalition Against Racism in Sports and Media, and we've primarily been working with schools in Michigan. We have 52 schools in Michigan that use native sports mascots, native themed mascots, 33 high schools. And just to start off, everything you learned in the K through 12 educational system is BS. It's nationalism propaganda. You didn't learn anything about the real native life, real prior to European invasion. The schools are perpetuating a lie that they're honoring us by calling us Redskins, Indians, warriors. They're teaching our kids to pretend to be like us, while pretending that we don't exist. So we have, their storyline is that we were conquered and killed off, and while, but we were savages, and that we were no match for the conquerors because they were superior to us, and so they're gonna honor us with these names. So basically that's what we're doing, is trying to re-educate the entire population, one person at a time, one audience at a time, about who we are, that we still exist. Our culture was beautiful. We aren't savages. And so, this manifests itself, this miseducation that everybody has received, manifests itself into a culture shaming for our children in these schools, and microaggressions, and hate crimes if they happen to speak out against their own mascots. So, our group has had some wins here in Michigan. We got the Belding Michigan High School, which were the Redskins, or the R word, R slur, that we call it, to change their mascot to the Black Knights. We also facilitated the removal, spearheaded the removal of the Fountain of the Pioneers in Kalamazoo, Michigan, which depicted a pioneer holding a weapon over a native person, had been there since 1940. We're currently working with Pawpaw, Michigan schools, who calls themselves the Redskins also. There are 5 schools in Lower Michigan that call themselves the slur word. So we have a Senate Bill 487, the Michigan Senate, that would eliminate the use of the R word in our public schools in Michigan. It's in committee right now, and we hope to get that out of committee by the end of the year. We also have a GoFundMe set up. We have a billboard, and you may have read it in the newspaper. We've been in the newspaper a lot lately. And I'll show you the billboard.
It says redskin, noun, older slang, disparaging, offensive. The word redskin is very offensive and should be avoided.
So this billboard message was taken directly out of the Webster's Learner's Dictionary, and it is located on I-94 between Chicago and Detroit. We have a GoFundMe account set up to help keep that billboard up as long as we can. We also have a website, www.nativerightsmi.org. We have Facebook pages, Twitter page, Instagram page. We don't have an information table today because of the wind, blew the tent down, but we will tomorrow. So please stop by tomorrow, pick up some literature, and sign up as a supporter to help us get this misappropriation changed. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Chimigwech, thank you so much, Julie. So you got some action items already, folks.
Amen.
So I think it might work best for you all to sort of speak together if you want to. I'm going to give my mic to Chanel.
Oh,
Yeah.
perfect. Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Harvest Gathering. Thank you for having us. It's the first time for me and Chanel. Thank you for inviting us into your hearts and giving us your attention.
Yeah.
So we are a group, we're a band, but I'll say this first thing on my own behalf and on behalf of the people where I'm from. The Queen designed my brain. Everyone that I knew when I was born as property of the Queen. They lived in a Commonwealth colony. They were basically little British subjects in training. They couldn't vote. They had no representation. They had no power. I grew up with her picture above my schoolhouse. My grandmother at the time loved to read her Bible, and though her eyes had gone bad, she still needed her salvation. So she taught me how to read, and I learned to read by reading the King James Bible. All the best scholars of the Queen's realm wrote that book, and that's how I learned how to read. And that's why I say the Queen designed my brain. The very framework of how I think and speak is the handiwork of colonialism. So I spent my whole life using creativity to kind of take back my own story. And now, with the help of these two ladies to my right, we do some work to bring together communities and colonialize Pan-African kids from places as far apart as Rwanda and Accra, Ghana, and Lagos, all who came up under the same system, not really, knowing the roots of how they got where they got and how the power structures and the things we're taught, why they even existed. And so it's been a reappropriation, I think, of ourselves. That's been my journey. And now we, through music, try to facilitate a space in Toronto where we live for people from all over the world that have that similar story.
And the space that we create too, it's a very honest space. Just like my background a little bit, I have a lot of, in my family there's a lot of culture, I guess you can say. And so I've always grew up just always accepting of any color. I have my nieces and nephews, some of them are from half Laos, My sister is half white, half black. My other one is half Guyanese. And I have all of that in my family. So I never, ever say, this is my half sister, this is my half brother, anything like that. It's always, this is my sister, this is my brother. And if you have further questions, then, but it's very in me just to be accepting, loving, no matter what. So it's really nice to be on a panel like this to kind of just hear everyone's views, because everyone does have different views, even if you're not, doing something just yet, but just being that person who actually believes, that is the first step, because the honesty of being real that's where you can start, right? Because other people basically just feed from that. So a very natural kind of feeling coming from this. And this is our band, so we have a lot more to share, but it's a very natural love for everyone, and this is what we want to keep on doing.
Yeah.
Educating, right?
And for me, I actually grew up about 25 miles from here. I'm from Rapid City, Michigan, born and raised, went to Kalkaska High School. Literally hometown girl. Went to Harvest Gathering for the first time like 14 years ago when I was in high school. And it's really special to be back with my family here, with me from Toronto. And so John and I started working together about 3 years ago. And we literally met in this random bar. I was playing in a country band, but within the first 5 minutes formed a band, because I actually had the privilege of spending some time in Ghana, West Africa, going to university and studying music. And so we connected quickly on that. built a music project and band from there. But what's been the most special thing that we've done together that he briefly mentioned is we have a collective called House Orpheus. And so through that, we put on a bunch of events in Toronto, and our pillars are decolonization and intersectional feminism. And that's the foundation that we build everything. So I do a dance party, an Afro house, Afro beats, dance hall, soca dance hall party. Twice a month, we do an open mic night once a month, and we throw other events and big fetes in the city. But there's a lot of power when you are able to curate, like who has a space, who gets to speak, who gets to talk. So for us in Toronto, it's really important for us to be able to like give people space who don't often have that space, give people a voice and space to just be safe and free and express themselves and be heard, because a lot of people, as we know, are completely marginalized and suppressed. So that's the work we do together, a very brief background, and it's been really beautiful to watch. We've been doing about a year and a half now, and Pan-Africanism is another pillar to the work that we do, and so it's about bringing together everyone who has had this shared experience, and then others such as myself who I have a main piece in the puzzle, though I was not at all the same experience, but I grew up here in Rapid City, incredibly conservative, like Trump country, hearing the N-word all the time growing up, in my extended family, and it's like I'm coming from that perspective. We're all kind of coming from these different perspectives to combat this together. Yeah.
Thank you so much. What a day too, huh? How about these high winds and just the energy of it? I'm feeling it, feeling grateful. So colonialism, it's a word that we learn about in school and sometimes is taught to us to go with what you were talking about, Julie. Some of what we were taught is just plain wrong, and it also tells us that these things happened in the past. And I think that oftentimes in discussions of race, in my experience, people think that it's really just a matter of personal preference. It's sort of like, well, I'm not racist, end of conversation. But to talk about structural racism, and these are, to me, a couple of symptoms of structural racism, colonialism perpetuates itself. One classic example in so many cities is gentrification, the violence of gentrification. And environmental justice is another major symptom of structural racism. People of color, Native communities, disproportionately affected by the harms of environmental degradation. But thinking about how colonialism manifests itself right now, and cultural appropriation, I like to think, in talking with people in white majority communities, I think it's very important to talk about the difference between intent and impact. Mm-hmm. So people might do something with the intent of celebrating a culture, but the impact is actually harmful and offensive and triggering of generational trauma of this culture being exploited and oppressed. So if each of you could just speak in your own words and also to the work that you're doing about both colonialism as it shows up now in American society and cultural appropriation, and also what people can do about it, how people can become more aware and take these good intentions and manifest them in a positive impact.
So let's start with Julie, because when we're talking about colonialism, I think the closest here in this land on Turtle Island, in direct front line right now, we all are, but I want to give that to you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I understand that the intent, when we're talking about the mascot issue, per se, people say, well, it wasn't intended to be anything bad or egregious. The intent was to honor you. Well, if you use the analogy of a little boy goes outside and hits a baseball and breaks the neighbor's window, and then the mom says, well, my son didn't intend to do that, but the window's still broken, and who's going to repair the window? Who's going to pay for the window and make it right? So the impact is we've got a broken window and nobody wants to do anything about it. So the intent, who knows what the intent was in many cases. But the impact is on our people, on our communities, and it continues. Violence continues as a result of colonial tactics and what we were taught as children. So yeah, that's my take on it.
So one of the things that I think is kind of difficult for some people, I just want to go back a tiny bit to the language, the colonial language that is embedded in all of us that we don't even realize. The language, the English language is aggressive. It anthropomorphizes everything. It humanizes everything. I was speaking to someone today, and they said, what is the most natural way for feminine energy that's coming out in nature? Like, how do you see that in nature? And they said the love of an animal for their child, their baby, right? That is the quintessential perfect place for you to see feminine wisdom and action in nature. And I'm looking at them going, really? Like, just the idea that everything has to be humanized, that for us to not recognize that the mother is holding us all the time, that love of feminine interconnectivity and generation is always here, and we don't have to humanize it. And so something that I think a lot of people really don't get about why it is hurtful and harmful to indigenous people when you spend you're raised in an invisibilizing culture. When you go to communities around reservations, indigenous communities here on Turtle Island, you will find more racism than you could ever imagine. And I am a brown woman, I'm very light, I have a little less melanin, but I have never experienced anything like what I experience when I'm in an indigenous, on the outskirts of an indigenous community. So when you live with something like that all day, and then you have people who say, I can honor you by extracting your culture, by singing your songs, by selling sweat lodge ceremonies, by appropriating your spiritual, really what has been stripped from many people in indigenous communities. The elders are holding on and they're working hard, and the youth are coming, and everybody, but like the traditional thing is, well, another drunk Indian. That's bullshit. Excuse my language, but when you continuously and without stopping work to invisibilize a culture and then rape them of their very own culture, and I am sorry to use such a hard word, and then stick it in their face while you're wearing, Southwestern Navajo prints, or you are singing a Lakota song that you heard at Standing Rock. This is a culture that is being stripped of people. And so when you call a redskin, or when you step into that clothing item that you got at the Gap, and you don't recognize that there are people who don't have access to their own culture, that's when you begin to step up and go, wait a minute, I didn't even think about that. That there are people who have culture that is so deep-rooted that you don't understand that every thread, every single piece of a tapestry has meaning. It has spiritual connectivity, and then it's flaunted. You can see it at Burning Man. You can see it in many of these places. And so while she's here and this comes up and it says, yes, this is slang, that's baseline. It's so much deeper than that. It's so much deeper than the surface of how any of us can look when we don't stand in the shoes of people who are trying to be invisibilized, of systemic invisibilization, and then to flaunt it.
I mean, the key thing with appropriation is about is power, right? The key element is that there's a power dynamic, and just because you're ignorant of it doesn't mean you're not using it. Mm-hmm. And I think that, I find there's very few people that are intentionally trying to do the wrong thing. But there are a lot of people that are very ignorantly doing the wrong thing because, and it's a challenge. We live in a ahistorical society, and what history there is, as Julie was saying, is often, it's been weaponized, to put it frankly. It's been weaponized to serve a majority. I came here wearing a shirt because I was on the internet and I saw this guy in Chicago with a shirt that looked like a Washington slur word shirt with the logo, except there was a white guy in it, a blonde guy, and underneath it said Caucasian. And he just I bought it because I thought what happened in the video was amazing. He just walked around with it. That's it. And he got so many people were so offended by this shirt. It caused this crazy time warp where it's kind of like, there a lot of those people are the ones that think it's okay when it's not them. And it's important to understand that the history of colonialism is the history of brutality, essentially saying, we can do this, and so we are going to do this, and if we need to dehumanize you to do it, then we're going to do it. And then very often in those circumstances, the history of Trinidad, where I'm from, is that the only things that survive are those cultural things. They become not just like your last piece of your culture. Like, you've lost your language, your liberty, your religion, you've lost everything. And sometimes the only things that survive, especially in African cultures, were the drums, because they didn't even realize how powerful and important it was. It was so foreign to them. And now, that's the thing that in music that we make, we try to start with the drum, because a drum from Mali can be the exact same rhythm as they use in Jamaica. And suddenly you're playing it and you put those people in a room and they reappropriate. We call it reappropriation because it's like those very cultural things are the things that help people survive colonialism. And then when someone takes those things, which are important and powerful and potent beyond just a song or a sari or a drum, it means so much more because it's helped people survive so much more. And so I think it's what makes it especially triggering for a lot of people. And from my point of view, from our point of view, it's about I need to relearn my own culture and that own history, and I need to reclaim it and own it. But I think it's all our history too. Mm-hmm. It's not just like that's my history. That's all our history. That's all our heritage. And I feel like that is the beginning of having the appreciation for what it feels to not have the power, to have the shirt with your face on it. That's the beginning of it, is that we need to become aware. We need to become aware, and we need to listen to each other. And it's a difficult thing. It requires energy, but I think, there's a lot of people sitting here today that I think are listening, and this is the beginning. So thank you for that.
Yeah, and I guess I just want to touch on, Seth, you mentioned, okay, well, what now? If you're aware, what can you do? Because we have this really interesting relationship, because we're kind of on both sides of history here, and we're working together towards this. And I think and we are just this conversation is never ending. As we keep evolving, it keeps evolving, and we have to keep on leveling up. And especially myself, it's constant self-reflection and being self-aware always of my subject position and what I'm doing and the space I'm taking up and stuff like that. So I think a lot of it is self-awareness. I think the first thing too is awareness, of course. First step is to be open, to listen, and to be aware, but also to not be frozen by guilt is a big one too. Be look, this is what's up. This is, and this is a privilege I've experienced throughout my whole life, but don't let that freeze you. Acknowledge it, because it's really important to just acknowledge history and your own history. and your own privileges, and then to use that as fuel rather than to paralyze you, is really important. And to constantly, and like I said, to constantly know that like it never stops. The journey, it's like your layers just keep on being peeled off, and you're constantly reassessing and you're constantly moving forward. And a lot of it to me is like being very aware of the space I take up, whether that's speaking, whether that's physically, whether that's even me. Like, we've had conversations about even different festivals and stuff we wanted to play, and for me to be like, is it even appropriate for me to be in the band for this? And that's a real serious conversation, even though like he and I are like the core founders of this group and movement. Like, it was specifically Afropunk Festival we were talking about, and I'm like, am I actually doing more harm than good by being there and taking up space? And you have to really have that awareness and conversation, and I think you have to have that willingness to sometimes, you know what, the best thing for me to do is to actually not be there. There's times where it's, you know, like I said, to take action and to show up, and there's times where maybe it's best to not show up, and just to be open to that and aware of that is like, I think, where we're at now. Yeah,
and it's very crucial to understand that I don't think the objective is to make anyone feel bad about themselves. I think really what it's about is about so that we can all be, most folks I know, we just want to be heard, just want to be seen, just want to be like, have an experience that's valued the same as everyone else. And so that's really what it's about. And it is challenging. I mean, we go through it ourselves, where it's like we have to be like, we have to constantly be reevaluating what we're doing, and is it safe for folks? And there's folks that come and say, wow, that's the safest space I could ever be in as a queer woman of color. And then there's folks that come and sometimes are triggered by what's going on because they feel like we're too inclusive. They feel like it should be our culture for our thing. And, and it's a challenge. And I wrestle with it because I feel that there's being a bridge. I recognize that that's where I am because, a lot of growing up in that space that, again, was sort of, it's a context designed by the colonizer, like to the point where, the Queen was hanging over me while I read the books that her people wrote for me to learn from. And when I was 13, I was teleported to just north of here on the Ontario side of the border, northwestern Ontario, and it was a shocking thing for me, and for the rest of my life until about 5 years ago, when I moved to Toronto, I lived in spaces where I was always a minority, from growing up in spaces where I was always in the majority, and it was a shocking thing. One of the first things I learned about North America is how terrible the indigenous people of North America are treated. It was one of the first things I learned in Northwestern Ontario. But I also recognized the dynamics of power, because it was ingrained in me, even though I was in the majority. The whole atmosphere we were birthed in was built that way. So, nowadays I see myself as a bridge. Like, I went to university, I studied English literature. I know probably more about European history than most people here, which is oddly ironic, right? Because why should that be? But you can't unprogram your brain. So if the Queen designed my brain, I'm going to embrace that, and we embrace that. And my place in it, I think, is to be a bridge and to accept that, it's really complex and you're not always going to make everyone happy. But I guess, to give you an example, and this is something I'd love to hear what the other folks on the panel think of, but so we have, because we've built this safe, inclusive space, we have folks from all over Africa, folks from the Caribbean together, united by those same drums. And then we have a lot of white folks, North American-born folks, who are in the space as well. People like Sarah, just trying to support, trying to sort of help do the right thing. And sometimes women of color will come and say, well, I'm a bit triggered by their presence. Right? So it's a really tough thing because you're kind of like, well, that's not what we're trying to do. But also, in order to manage that, do we exclude people?
So I want to step in and ask
Yeah,
you, do
sure.
you stop right there, identify that pattern of harm before it replicates and handle it in the moment? And sit and converse with those women who are
Absolutely.
triggered?
Absolutely. I spent, and Sarah will tell you this, I spent about 3 weeks speaking to people in the community of all shades and had those conversations, in particular the women of color, where it was coming from, the Caribbean women in particular. And I had in-depth conversations with quite a range of folks, and we came up with some what we thought were remedies for the situation. And,
Awesome.
And we're implementing, but I think it illustrates a really difficult conundrum, you know.
I have something I want to add to that, but I noticed we didn't make it all the way down the line there, and I want to stand for my sister there.
I think it's so funny. I'm just like taking it in. Thank you. No, it's funny because, again, it all starts with education for that person, right? Because, you know, you could be sitting here, I could be sitting here, whatever, but how far it actually goes down as to how much that we actually understand, you know? So even just sitting here, again, I feel really honored just to hear different sides of it, but I'm sitting here thinking that even putting that sign up, that's the first step. But then there's still so much more because it goes right down to what you on your very own are thinking. You know, when somebody sits beside you and you might move, do you ask yourself why you moved? Or do you just move and then continue watching whatever you're doing or whatever it is, you know? It really doesn't matter unless you are really gonna get down and deep and change it, because then nothing's really happening. And it's still living on false. You know, all this is really because people wanna, you know, someone wants to say, no, I'm here, no, I'm here. Oh, no, you're here, I'm here. That's what this is all from. So, I don't know, it's nice kind of just being in this again. As I'm saying, I'm probably one of the younger ones sitting at the table. I'm 24.
Yeah.
But I do have a lot of wisdom because growing up, I've had these questions ever since I was growing up, right? Like, why are people like this? Why am I getting treated this way? Why is it when I wear my weave, do people come right up to me and put their hands in my head? That's not okay. I get that it looks really soft. You don't want to touch it, but, you know, it's just, it starts with that number one person, and it's great to have even just you guys, to have myself, to have everyone sitting here to try to learn, because when we can hold things like this, when I can be honest, other people want to be honest. They want to be real. They want that, because it's the most best way to live is in complete honesty, just knowing that, you know, life is life. I'm not going to put anyone down, because who am I to do that? Who is anyone to who, right? Who? So when you can really feel that, and when you can be at one with that feeling of you're just not going to, right? But there's matters to talk about, but that is the sole thing, in my opinion, is that person. And what are we going to do to show people that it's better to just be in one with everyone, you know? Education first, because we can't just sit here in the world today and just, well, or maybe, and get all that knowledge, right? You have to go out there and want to figure out what's going on, how are people feeling, and how can I help, and what have I done that maybe hasn't helped or has helped, right? It's just seeing those things. And like I said, when you have a reaction and when you have a feeling, where are you going with that feeling? Do you just stop there? Because that too is just giving up. So, sorry, that's, yeah. I'm not sorry.
Are we done in 1 minute? One of the things that I would love to wrap this up. They call me the wrap-up girl when they bring me to a rally. I'm the one who like succinctifies it all and spits it out. And I've been trying to listen intently and just let go in not a desire to respond. Yet my brain is going, pshoo, pshoo, pshoo. And this is how I want to wrap this, because it's gone across and so all together. Everybody's saying the same thing. I've never said this on a stage before, but I'm going to say it today. I am Scattercoke. I am the mingling of the waters. I am the mingling of the tribes. Scattercoke First Nation is a band of Scattercoke tribal members who stepped away from federal recognition and gaming rights sort of mentality, taken by the 12th great grandson of Massasoit, who was the person to land contact on the East Coast. And Sachem Hawkstorm is his name now, the person now who's leading this small but growing band. And he asked me to join the tribe about 2 years ago if I would accept such a thing, and I said, you know what, we're going to have to get back on that, like in a couple of years or something. And I stand here with the colonizer, the colonized, the enslaved, listening for spirit all the time in every bit of my action. And it's really hard. And so I'm standing in the shower thinking, Perry Farrell style, and the water's coming down, and I'm purifying with my Tibetan, Buddhist, Vajra, Sattva, purifying water, and I'm thinking, man, well, I guess the Tibetans gave it to us because they knew exactly, they have enough to give us, whereas other communities don't. They're not ready to give us all their wisdom, right? And so I'm going back and forth, and I'm going, oh my gosh, I am the water. And the water is me, and I know this, and I know this, and I know this, and this land is me, and I am the land, and I am the mountain, and I am Scattercoke, which is the mingling of the tribes. It was the mingling of the Algonquin people left after the Indian Removal Act. And now I happen to be graced by a tribal leader who sees me, not for the one drop of indigenous blood or the 20% that I have, and I'm not joining this tribe because I have a lick of indigenous blood. I have Arapaho, I have Blackfeet. That doesn't matter. I'm joining this tribe right now as me, and the only way that I can decolonize is if I do, as everyone here has said, and remove myself of the guilt and recognize that I am the ancestors' prayers. I am your ancestors' prayers, because the Dutch in me right now is trying as best as I can to go all the way back to the earth and be the answer to the prayers of the people who could never understand why they would come and try to take everything, and why they took almost everything. And so for everyone out there who is going, who am I, where am I, it's very normal for people who are raised in a celebrity culture to want to reach to indigenous communities for their medicine. And if we start right here, as you said, in our own body and root to where we touch this earth, that's where we're going to be able to begin to decolonize. Because it's going to start with our mind, but it's going to have to be the acceptance of who we are. I don't care how much melanin is in your skin, you're touching the earth. And it's not about we're all indigenous to this earth, man. No, it's about traveling through the ancestral recognitions of who we are and honoring that, because no matter who we are, somewhere, our original ancestors honored this earth. Whoever they were, however they got colonized and then recolonized and then came and just spewed all of those patterns of harm into like rock solid death grip, we're gonna be okay if we acknowledge that we are here now answering the prayers of your ancestors, of my ancestors, of our ancestors, who were all going, hey, could you cut it out, man? And now here we are in this generation cutting it out. So the fact that you're here right now, thank you, bless you. I honor every one of you for taking the time to sit here and hear us.
How about it, everybody? Thank you so much, Rachel, Julie, John, Sarah, Chanel. We have to get off the stage now. We are running on 24/7 Colonial time, and we have a schedule. But all of the panelists, if I may offer this, could just meet you right over here. We didn't have time for questions, but if you do have some questions and would like to chat with these folks, right over here. Rachel will also be doing a workshop and speaking on another panel. Julie, as she mentioned, is going to have a table for her nonprofit, the Michigan Coalition Against Racism in Sports and Media. And John Orpheus, these three individuals are going to be rocking this stage tonight at 1 a.m. So the Royal Grand Band is next. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Thank you.